Imagine having everything you've ever dreamed of, that idyllic life, right in front of you. And then in the blink of an eye, it all falls apart. The life that you thought you were living was actually a lie as you witness your entire world unravel. Meet today's guest, Rachel Graham, CEO and co founder of Healing Springs Ranch, an addiction treatment center in Tioga, Texas. In this episode, Rachel dives deep into transitioning from PTSD to joyful living, tackling her own emotional unavailability and the interplay between trauma, mental illness, and addiction. She also shares her firsthand experiences with inadequate treatment programs and the crucial role families play in the healing process. If you have stood in Rachel's shoes or are on the brink of losing it all, we've built a membership community just for you. Stop navigating this journey alone. Join us at voicesencourage.com/thrive.
Hi, everyone. This is Kale Wells with Voices Encourage, and we have an extraordinary guest today. I've been so excited to have Rachel Graham on with me. She has an amazing story. She's an amazing light in the world. She has turned her story into a joyful life and super empowering purpose. I'm going to turn it over to you, Rachel.
Well, thanks, Kale. I'm so grateful to be here, and I love what you're doing and talking to the family members, because very often in the equation of addiction, the family members are left behind.
Right.
And the family members don't know what to do. They may not even been aware of what was going on. So they're going through what I would call really a PTSD response of finding out that something's happened with their loved one. And if it's a major crisis, we have an overdose or something along those like financial crisis, whatever it may be.
Right.
That can be very scary for the family members. So that's something I'm passionate as a family member. That's how I got into the field of addiction. I came in kicking and screaming. I don't know that I wanted to do it initially.
Don't we all?
Yeah, it became one of those, you're going to be doing this. I had a higher power kind of directing that for me. It wasn't until I just let go that I actually started seeing what I was supposed to be doing with this narrative, this very difficult narrative. You and I've talked a little bit about my story, but
I'd love you to tell your origin story.
Yep. So my origin story coming into this is I was the spouse of someone that struggled with addiction. And one of the things that I learned in this process is typically when we talk about addiction, people think drugs and alcohol. And really, addiction spans a much broader spectrum in terms of what we call process addiction. So process addictions are shopping, gaming, it could be gambling, it could be pornography, it could be sex, overeating, undereating, the list goes on.
Right.
So the reality of it is you can pretty much be addicted to anything. And people say, well, how do I know if I'm addicted? Well, when it's causing you financial problems, legal problems, health problems, relationship problems, and it's something that you can't stop, that's probably something that needs to be looked at.
Right.
So I started this journey, and it's interesting. The story has a happy ending. It was a very dark place in my life. And I uncovered a lot of really what I'd say betrayal, both on the sex addiction side and on the financial side. I uncovered it overnight. My world blew apart in 24 hours. The world I thought I was living, I realized was somewhat of a facade. The shock and awe of realizing that level of betrayal for me sent me into really a place, I call it the rabbit hole, down the rabbit hole. So that's where you end up with depression, anxiety, those kinds of things. PTSD sits there. I ended up looking for help to kind of navigate my own issue. He ended up going to treatment. And like I said, the family gets left behind. The family often doesn't even know what to do.
Right.
I knew it was something I needed to do, but I didn't know what it was. And I tried support groups. And while those are wonderful and can be amazing for some people, I needed therapy, not a support group. And I didn't really understand the difference. So that's a big difference for folks, is that I really need to do my own personal work before I could be in a support group and be able to handle other people's issues.
Right.
Other people's issues.
That's a great distinction, Rachel.
So most people don't realize, I didn't know that. And it wasn't until I was going to these support groups, and it wasn't until I met a therapist who said, honey, this is not a codependency issue. This is a PTSD response. And I had been going to all these support groups that said codependency. I didn't even know what that was.
Yeah.
And I thought, how am I codependent if I didn't condone it? I didn't know about it. I didn't approve it. And the minute I found out about it, I got away from it. That doesn't make sense. So something that's very common in our industry is for us to talk about codependence. and
Yeah.
the partners or the family members being codependent. And while some may be, not everyone is.
Correct.
That's another distinction that I would make, because I couldn't understand how I fit into that definition. So when the therapist explained to me PTSD, I said, that's exactly what I'm
Right.
feeling.
Bingo. Yeah.
That the shock and awe of
Right.
a betrayal at such a level from someone you trusted. And people say, well, how did you not know this stuff was going on? Well, it happened very quickly in terms of escalating. I think there was some secret behaviors, but they were very well explained. And it wasn't until a therapist said to me, and this is something with sex addiction, that often the spouse partner carries around a lot of negative feelings about self, that I wasn't pretty enough, or I wasn't this enough, fill in the blank, I wasn't blank enough. You put that together in the narrative that you start subscribing to.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I really understood the nature of addiction, whether it's substance, process, whatever, that I really started my own healing journey. Now, that doesn't mean I was off the hook in terms of what I needed to do in terms of personal growth. So
Sure.
I'll come back to that in a minute. But what I did learn is that when you're in a situation like this and you have a PTSD response, you've got to work through that and actually heal yourself through that, and really get to a place where you can move forward in your life, because you're stuck in this loop that just plays over. So I did a lot of personal work. And one of the things I learned as a family member too, that work. And it was, for me, I think, being extremely naive. And I beat myself up for that. And the therapist said to me, you were doing what a dutiful wife does. You believe your spouse.
Right.
And when she told me that, to me was the most self-forgiving statement. She was right. You tell me you were at the gym, I believe you're at the gym. And then the other piece of this is, and I think this is a form of naivete, is if I wouldn't do it to you, you couldn't possibly do it to me.
Right.
So there's all these things. So the reality of it is, it became much more of a personal journey for me as I move forward. He moved forward in his journey. We went through some very difficult moments. We had 2 kids together that were very young at the time. And, we were sheltering them from kind of the graphic details of things.
Sure.
And it wasn't until we went to a family program at one of the treatment facilities that I would say all HE double hockey sticks flew loose. Where they went into graphic detail with my kids about the nature of sex addiction.
Oh, whoa. Okay.
Yeah, a 10 and 12-year-old.
Okay.
And one of the things that we had tried to do, and I was very angry and upset, and I was leaving the marriage. I made a decision to leave the marriage. And while I was very upset about how he showed up as a spouse, he was a good dad.
Yeah.
And I was trying to protect that relationship while I really compartmentalized my situation, so I didn't bleed that into the kids. That's something, I was a child of a divorced family where you're poisoned against my kids. I know how that ends.
Yes.
I was really upset with what happened. It traumatized my kids. And I sat back, went home, and I had a very dark, pivotal moment. And when I went home, I found out that this was crazy. I was on my way home. The gal that was watching the kids later that day, I dropped them off and she was watching them so I could go to work. And when I was coming home and go see him at the treatment facility, go back to the treatment facility. And when I was coming home, she said to me, how far are you away from the house? I said, about 5 minutes. And she said, well, your house is flooding. So in the course of a week, I uncover an egregious level of betrayal, both sexually and financially. I ended up having to euthanize a dog, which ironically was the wedding gift I gave him. So I thought, I'm euthanizing my dog and I'm euthanizing my marriage in the same week.
Wow.
And yeah, what are the chances of that? And then, here I am with this flood in my house, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my life. I had resigned from a big job prior to this reveal. And I was already so deep into my departure, there was no turning back. Here I am about to be without a job, a high-paying job, and in this situation of that week. And I came home, and I'm really good at compartmentalizing in a crisis. But when the crisis kind of settles, I have to have some outlet by which I release that. And I learned that day it was coming. I told the gal that was watching the kids, I said, here's $40 or whatever, go take the kids, go get ice cream, be gone for a few hours because I'm about to lose it. The kids
Good
just
for
see it.
you. Good for you. Yeah.
I don't want to see their mom in that
Right.
place.
Yeah.
And I don't want to scare them, but
Sure.
I knew it was coming. So she left and I fell to my knees in like this much water, screaming at God. I'm angry, I'm cussing. It was not pretty. And I couldn't understand why me. I felt like I had been a dutiful wife. I had done these different things. Why is this happening? And why all of a sudden? And what was very unique about that moment, I've never had one of those moments again, is I felt what felt like a hand on the back of your neck, pull you up. And I felt the words, "You're going to be okay. I'm trying to show you something." I wasn't having a psychotic break as much as I was having an awakening.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I answered out loud, "Well,
Yeah.
you got my bleep attention."
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, where's this going? And it all of a sudden, it's almost like the path, like the breadcrumbs started presenting in front of me, and I followed them. It ultimately revealed really a bigger life purpose in what I do today, which is co-owning and running a residential treatment facility for addiction, trauma, and mental health. And something I learned in this process is addiction doesn't hang out by itself.
Yes.
It hangs out with trauma and mental health. They're the three amigos, the trifecta. They are the one, they hang out. And if you whack one down, I guess I liken it to whack-a-mole.
Yes.
One, the other one pops up. Yeah, the other one pops up.
Right.
So I realized they weren't treating those concurrently. So that was my big aha.
Okay.
It needed to be treated concurrently.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. I don't know that I've ever had a guest speak about the three amigos that way. So that's such a gift. So help me understand, what was the next kind of pivotal step for you? I'm imagining that you kind of went into learning.
I did. And I had to go through the emotions. This is something we stress at Healing Springs, and it's something that I feel is important for everyone. You've got to feel the feelings.
Yes.
If you suppress the feelings, they're going to come out, whether it's in GI issues or depression, anxiety. I started having an anxiety response to all of this. I was just overwhelmed. And something we teach people is when you're feeling anxiety, the place to kind of start searching for the source of that is anxiety is rooted in a fear of the future. So what am I scared of that's coming? And depression is a look back at the past. So you're replaying something that's happened in the past. Once I learned that, I started looking into how I could heal myself. So I knew I needed to be on a journey. I knew my journey wouldn't look like his journey was one of recovery. Mine was one of PTSD recovery. I had this moment of clarity when I sat down with him and I said, look, I can't be married to you, but I did make a commitment at the altar in sickness and in health. We're always going to be a family. We have 2 kids. I'm going to do my best to help you get to where you need to be while I work on myself independently. We're going to live 2 different lives. We're going to go on with our lives. But I recognize that he's a wonderful man, actually. And as we went through the process, I learned a lot about his childhood trauma that was news to me, that he had suppressed and hid. Something that I try to do is get out there and help people understand at the root of sex addiction is some sort of sexual trauma. And one of the things that I learned in this process, and this is something that's like a big dark secret in the world around male sexual trauma. You know, as women, we have a Me Too movement. We're very vocal about whether it's incest, molestation, whatever it may be. In the male community, it's very taboo and they don't want to talk about it. There are organizations like 1in6.org that are created, and the notion is that 1 in 6 men are sexually molested, and honestly that number is probably higher. It's just those are the people that reported it.
I totally agree with you.
And you start looking at the root of addiction, and there's patterns. That's the interesting thing about addiction is I see a lot of patterns, and I can say with a high level of certainty, if you give me a 20-year-old male heroin addict, there's one of 2 things likely that happen: a sports injury, and you were given pain meds for that sports injury, or some sort of sexual trauma. And this is the way to escape the pain and the shame that goes with that. Because when you are sexually molested, there's a part of your psyche that might play through the role of somehow, did I deserve that? What is it about me? All these unhealthy things that you tell yourself, when the reality of it is you're a sweet, innocent child. You didn't deserve that. Or you were someone that said no, and you didn't get a choice in this. So when I got deeper into addiction, one of the things I learned is that to have this level of compassion, because these are people that are hurt. They're really hurt. By me pushing away and saying what probably most women would say to a husband that's committed adultery, and being angry and all of those things, really and truly only reinforced the negative self-talk that he had. And I was being cruel to another human being that was in deep pain and probably didn't even understand how to process it. I chose a different path. I decided to go on, heal myself. That journey was a couple years, a long journey, and there's a lot of self-reflection to look at things about yourself that made either you a prime candidate for this thing to happen in your marriage, and really understand how to not punish someone in the future for the sins of past too, and learn to trust again.
Right. I think on part of my journey with my son has been, it's that higher level of consciousness, you know, to be able to love despite the outcomes. And it's a courageous path.
It is. It's a scary path. And what I tell people at my facility is everyone in the family dynamic has work to do. You're not off the hook. And the most painful thing for me was putting the mirror in front of my own face and saying, what are some things, how did I show up in that marriage for that marriage to, I'll say, work?
Right.
You know, one of the things, the most profound things I learned about myself is I was emotionally unavailable. I didn't even know what that meant.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, well, I can cry in front of him, so I'm emotionally available. No, and that's not what emotional availability is.
Yeah.
And the reality of it is, I would liken our marriage to a great friendship where you could do things together and have fun. You could co-parent together. You've got the soccer practice run. I got the band practice run. You really worked well as a team. But emotional availability is about shedding this exterior and letting someone see all of you, even the parts you don't like, and feeling safe to do so. I did not grow up in a family of origin where we did that. I learned that in the process. So that to me was probably the biggest aha I had in taking away from that, such that I can incorporate that now into new relationships.
No matter what's revealed to people, there's a skill path to moving and becoming a different person if you choose to. I'm super curious as to what were the major skills that you needed to acquire in order to become emotionally available.
I think grace and space. I need to extend grace to myself. I was really good at extending it to everybody else. And I had to give myself space. I don't particularly like to feel emotions. It's not a natural place for me to be. You look at my personality type on the Myers-Briggs and it doesn't do feelings very well.
INTJ?
ENTJ.
Okay, yeah,
you're right there. The kissing cousin to INTJ.
Right, yeah.
So I think learning to even recognize my feelings, learning what to call it, that this is anxiety, this is fear, this is anger, whatever it is. Something we teach at Healing Springs is you have a list of healthy emotions.
Yes.
But then you have too much or too little of it. Anger is a healthy emotion. We all are going to experience it. It's a healthy emotion to have, and it can be very constructive. Too much anger looks like rage, destructive. And at the root of rage is fear. Fear of something happening, right?
Right.
Too little anger is where you go numb. You suppress it. You just don't allow yourself to feel. So I kind of had to really learn emotions, basic emotions, and what that looks like and how you resolve that. And I'll tell you that I think unless you come from a very, very emotionally adept family, it's very difficult to truly understand your emotions and really understand what to do about them and how to express them in a healthy way.
And I can relate to you on that. You know, that wasn't my family either. So
very few people do.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what's interesting partly too is we have this tendency to think that everybody else's family is doing it well. And the vast majority of families are struggling because the statistics now are so off the chart. We are a wounded society and wounded world.
Are you feeling hijacked by the chaos of your loved one's addiction? Are you experiencing sleepless nights of endless worry? It's actually time for you to break free and find the calm in your storm. There is no need to be stuck in the heartbreak, the isolation, the judgment, the shame, the desperation of your loved one's addiction. If you don't get anything else from this podcast, I want you to understand that in fact you can go from that place and you can thrive no matter what choices your loved one's making. I've been where you are and I understand exactly how you feel. That's why I want to extend a personal invitation to you to join Voices in Courage community. We created this safe space to give you the support and resources you need in order to be able to rise above your circumstances, get out of the hole of desperation, and actually learn to thrive in the midst of the chaos. Join the Voices in Courage community now, and let's walk this path together so you can find true healing. With our resources and compassionate members, you'll find the strength and understanding you need to thrive. Stop navigating this journey alone. Visit voicesencourage.com/thrive to join today. Again, that's voicesencourage.com/thrive. We can't wait to see you there.
When I speak around the world, one of the things I tell everyone, regardless of what ethnicity, what religion, what country's on their passport, what mother tongue or what religion they subscribe to, I said at the end of the day, we're human beings. We bleed red, we have belly buttons, we breathe oxygen. And what I find so polarizing in today's society is we find all these ways that we're different.
Yes.
When the reality is we're way more similar if you sit down and you find those things. The human spirit and the human psyche wants relief from pain. So you think about it, if we have a surgery and we're recovering from some kind of major surgery, they give us pain meds, right? And so we take pain meds to really navigate the pain. Well, what people don't understand oftentimes is emotional pain can be as debilitating, if not more, than the physical pain. And most of us don't know how to fix it.
Yeah.
And we find that if we use a substance or a behavior, I get relief. So I'm going to do more of it.
Yeah.
And then that more of it becomes building tolerance, and you have to escalate it even higher and higher until you get to levels where it's completely out of your control.
I'm compelled to kind of ask, when did you feel like yourself kind of breathing again? Breathing your life, breathing joy again?
I think when I figured out there was purpose, and honestly, someone said something to me, probably the nicest compliment I've ever received. And it was someone who was watching me go through this on a periphery. He was an executive coach, and I was in a leadership development program at the time. And he came up to me and he said, "You're a lotus flower blooming in the muck." And at first I thought, well, that was a weird thing to say to me. But as I played it, I thought, you know what? The lotus flower becomes more beautiful because of the muck.
Exactly.
Right? So that's when I realized, wait a minute, there's something here. This needs to be part of my narrative. And I started speaking organically. I didn't set out to be a public speaker. It happened because some folks wanted me to explain what was going on in our community, because there was a lot of misconceptions and a lot of negative gossip around what was happening. So I thought, well, I'm just going to get up on a stage and tell people the way it is and share my story. Well, I learned that emotional availability of putting myself on the stage was quite therapeutic. And then I realized very quickly, something dark is happening in almost every house. So you live in a neighborhood, like to your point, you think it's not happening in other families. The reality is, you live in a neighborhood. If you drove around the neighborhood, one family has financial problems. This one has extramarital affairs. This one has a kid, a special needs kid. This one has, something going on, deep, dark secrets, whatever it means, a layoff, whatever it is. There's something going on heavy in each family. And that's really kind of life. Life's you live enough birthdays, you're going to have enough experiences, some good, some bad. And my grandmother said something to me when I was a kid that I will carry with me, and I say it to myself when I get into these jams. I say, this too shall pass. And it's true. And that's both true of the negative times in life and the positive times. So be present and enjoy the moment. And really and truly, some of life's most difficult moments reveal a greater purpose. And be open to what it's saying to you and what your journey looks like. And sometimes, like for me, I just told you I was ENTJ on Myers-Briggs. I don't like something controlling me. When I learned to let go, it was amazing. When I stopped trying to control the narrative and I just said, you know what, I'm going wherever the wind blows. And I let it unfold organically and naturally. I was able to put one foot in front of the other. And I stopped focusing on this big goal destination out there. It's just all I need to do is make one more step forward. Today's job is to make a step forward. And if I fall back, that's okay. But then we get back up the next day and keep trying to make a step forward. And that's when I think it came to me that with all my experience in entrepreneurship, in healthcare, I was in different areas. And then with this particular situation, it revealed, okay, there needs to be a mashup of all of this. There's something I'm supposed to do with all of this. And when you get real still, the world speaks to you. We're so busy, distracted with cell phones and people and not being present and whatever. But when you get real still, the world really does speak to you. And it became very apparent by the people that were coming in my life, the things that were happening in my life, that this was a path I needed to go down. And I was so upset about what happened at that treatment facility that I felt like I could go down a punitive route and take a legal action against them, which really, what's that going to do? Get me my money back? It's not going to really do anything.
Right.
Or I could take what money I had left and hang out a shingle and do something different. And that's when I met some amazing folks that had the same passion, who I might not have ever met had I not gone through all of this. And I wouldn't have certainly recognized them if I hadn't gone through this, recognized their gifts and talents. They would
Right.
just an acquaintance that passed by, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we put together that, and that's the one thing we're really passionate about, is treating the three concurrently: the trauma, the mental health, and the addiction, and really looking at all three of those together versus in a silo.
Right. Well, I can't even begin to tell you how like thrilled and grateful I am that you approach it this way, that you've come to this place. And I love your ability to kind of suspend your humanity, so to speak, so that your spirit could rise and find the purpose in all of this.
Thank you. I think purpose reveals itself. And I use this visual. I teach group at the facility. I use this visual. And if this is the talents that you're born with and the ones that you've acquired through birthdays, training, whatever it may be. And this line is the things that you're passionate about. Like you'll get up at 4 a.m. to go do without an alarm clock. Where those two intersect, that's purpose.
Yeah.
And if you can find that, that's holy grail stuff.
Right.
If you can find that, then you play your game in this space above that point. You're going to feel much more rewarded. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but you're going to feel a level of peace, a level of contribution, a level of invigoration, because you're using the skills and talents that come uniquely to you, that you have, that you can offer back to the world. And I think the real definition of success is, are you going to leave this place a better place than you found it? And how can you gift your contribution through your skills and capabilities to make the world a better place and, help others? And that doesn't have to be on a grand stage. It could be helping just one person.
Are you in this place now, Rachel, where you believe that actually getting cracked wide open is the opportunity for purpose to rise?
I do. And I think it's where forgiveness happens. One of the things, and you said this in my TED Talk, when my ex-husband came to me and was making amends as part of his recovery, I said to him, if you're doing this for you, okay, you don't need to do it for me. And I said, because you've given me the greatest gift you could ever give a human being. I said, I found myself. I found meaning and purpose in this world. And I found the power of forgiveness. I have a great relationship with my ex-husband today. I admire the journey he's been on. It hasn't been easy for him. He can get along at family events. We've both gone on with our personal lives. But I realized too that forgiveness is something, it's a gift you give yourself. It allows yourself not to carry this negative narrative around and punishing everybody else for something, or they talk about taking the proverbial poison and hoping someone else dies.
Right.
I was like, life's too short.
It is.
I'm not going to walk around angry at the world, and I want to move on and be happy. And so I think finding the healing place, but then also recognizing I can't change history. And I don't know that I would. If someone said, would you change it? I don't know that I would.
No, I wouldn't change a thing about this journey with my son. And obviously it's been dropped to your knees, difficult at times to watch his torturous journey, and knowing at the same time that it's in service of a higher purpose for him and for me and for the world. Our work, I think, is really helping people see this actually is all in service of. And I believe that it is because the statistics are so high now in terms of addiction and all kinds of addictions and the trauma that the world has been in, that we are actually in a global kind of cracking open to rise to a higher level of consciousness collectively.
I agree with that. I agree. And I think in the equation of addiction, whether you're a family member or you're the person struggling, whatever the situation may be, is getting to that root pain and going the distance. Because to me, that's the cancer that becomes metastatic. So if you don't go get that root thing, whatever that is, and for some people, it's different. It's an experience that they had. It could be they're highly sensitive people. And they pick up everybody else's stuff. So they're carrying other people's emotions that wear way heavy on them, and they need an escape because they can't delineate between emotions in others. So, whatever it is, I would just say that, healing does happen. I watch some profound healing happen. I watch people transform their own lives. I watch people change
Yeah.
in huge ways. And there's nothing more rewarding than watching someone on their own, maybe with the help of coaches and mentors and sages and those types of things,
Yeah.
really heal themselves to a
Mhm.
place where they're content and they're
Mhm.
happy
Mhm.
and they're not harboring those feelings. And I get angry when people say, well, you wouldn't be an alcoholic if you stopped buying the bottle of vodka. If it were
Yeah.
that easy, they would have already done that. They don't
Right.
like where they are.
Right.
Same thing for a heroin. Heroin's one of those that you do it a few times and it has a death grip on you. And people don't
Yeah.
realize, and this is something I was telling a young person the other day about the nature of the synthetic drugs that are out there now. They are built to latch in and have a death claw on you the first time you use them. Fentanyl is a good example. So dangerous, so deadly. And you just don't know. You can buy the marijuana that was smoked in the 70s that
Is
people
not the
it's
marijuana
not
today.
exactly.
Mm-mm.
It's scary. It's very, very scary. And so, the drug industry has really advanced to a place that is deeply concerning to me. And that's just one part of addiction, the drug piece of that. You still, like I said, have the process addictions. You think about pornography, it's much more readily available now. We have online. You can
Right.
sit in the privacy of your own home and
Right.
binge watch pornography. And a
Right.
lot of people don't know that's the gateway drug for sex addiction. Just like marijuana is the gateway drug for larger drugs, because you escalate. You
Sure.
start out at a level and then that doesn't give you the dopamine rush, dopamine hit. So you have to keep advancing it and do more of it and maybe switch to something more potent to be able to get that same escape that
Right.
you're looking for.
And that was Sam's story. His last couple relapses were fentanyl. And just kind of speaking about the journey of it, the last one, he was all the way across the United States. So he begged me to bring him home. And I was like, you can't even get on an airplane. And it's not the right thing to bring you home. I thought to myself, in that kind of last phone call that I had with him around that, which he's now in recovery, was, okay, I'm being called to a higher level of consciousness here. So I'm like, okay, I got to pull Eckhart Tolle off the shelf, and I got to pull Byron Katie off the shelf. And I need to remind myself of the larger purpose of all of this and love him deeply still while with whatever outcome happens.
And I love what you just said. And one of the things we teach some of the family members, you can love someone, and loving people, it means sometimes you're going to disappoint them. And sometimes you have to put boundaries in place to protect yourself.
Right.
And that's okay. This is not your story, but I've seen it too, where parents are fearful when their child has overdosed, that they start giving in to every whim because they don't want to disappoint them or upset them. So they'll go use an overdose. And my theory is they're going to overdose if they want to overdose.
Yeah.
And you've got to let them build their emotional muscle because it's tender and it hasn't been developed, and let them feel disappointment. Let them get mad at you. If you're doing what you feel is best for you to protect your family, your interest, whatever, eventually they'll respond. If they're working on their program, they'll respond and they'll start understanding. And then later on, when they're further down the path, they'll thank you.
And this isn't everybody's story. So I want to make sure we're all clear about this is, within 2 days, Sam had found a fabulous facility. And chose life. That would not have been the story if I had leapt to find some way to bring him home or do all the things, because at that point he was 32. He had to choose his own life. I had chosen mine, and I was doing my work. That's probably, I think, for a lot of moms in particular, the hardest thing, because we're cracking the mommy code. We're completely rewriting the mommy book. And for a lot of moms, they're just not, I'm not doing that. It's too hard.
Yeah. And, kudos to you for taking that approach, because at the end of the day, you said something that was really, really important. I think it's good for your audience to know. He chose life. He had to choose it. You couldn't choose it as his mom. Right. You couldn't say, I want you to be happy and healthy and not do drugs. And you couldn't do that. And that's something that a lot of people don't understand, is that you can't control the person that's struggling. Right. You can be supportive, you can be encouraging, whatever it may be, in a healthy, boundaried way. Right. But you can control you and how you respond and what you do. That's the piece. And that's where, when you get help as a family member, you start seeing the power within you. Right. That you can't own the narrative. You can't be responsible for what this person does.
Right.
but you can be responsible for your actions and the way that you conduct yourself, such that if they take a different path or decide not to heal, or decide to do it a different way than what you think should be done, that you're okay with the fact that you're doing your own work and you're letting them do theirs and come to their own conclusion and decisions.
Right. I generally think that people get kind of caught up on the fact that this is a deadly disease. And when you're talking about fentanyl, it can happen just like that. It's still the same work.
It is.
It's still
We
the
don't
same.
even separate people with drug of choice. You know, we don't separate people because the reality is, if maybe you do heroin and I do cocaine and someone else shops and someone else is gambling, we're doing it for the same reason. We just have a different drug of choice.
Right. Exactly.
And if that drug is taken away, it's not uncommon to substitute it with something else. So maybe you took my credit cards away. Okay, now I'm smoking. The reality is you can take away and something from someone, but they'll pop back up with something else if the work isn't done to figure out the root cause.
Yeah, I mean, that's the crazy of this. It's the whack-a-mole of this, is because that's an external thing. This has to be an internal journey.
It absolutely does. And it's a spiritual one. It's one, and I think sometimes people enter into treatment because a family member's mandating it. But I can see the shift when all of a sudden they're getting it, that, wait, this is what I want for me. So there are ways that family members can encourage someone to go to treatment, but the old school vigilante way of picking someone up, throwing them in the car and forcing them to go, and that just, it rarely works. It can work in a few scenarios, but it rarely works. The invitational aspect of, hey, I want to have a happy, healthy relationship with you. We don't have one right now. In order for us to do that, I need for you to show up this way, in the relationship. And I'm committed to showing up this way. And I think too often when people go into treatment, they feel like they're the problem child, that there's something wrong with them. And one of the things when we talk to the family, that the responsibility is equally on you. And so when the family starts doing the work, what I watch is the loved one works harder because now they feel that they're in partnership with their family members and that we're all doing our work so that we as a family unit can be better.
Right. I totally love that. And I absolutely have that experience with my son. Well, we're kind of at the edge of our time together, but this has just been such a great conversation. Let me just ask you this. You've had so many pearls of wisdom for people, but if you could kind of narrow it down, what would be the first 3 steps that you would say to a family member when they're in the throes of the crisis?
I think having an awareness. So I use the acronym ARCH, ARCH.
Okay.
For having an awareness that you're in the rabbit hole. So it's a nod to Alice in Wonderland, that you're
Great.
in the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And then identifying root cause. Why am I here? Whether it's your own, in my case, emotional unavailability, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But then the C stands for change. So you need to change a variable. Everyone needs to change.
Yeah.
And then the H in ARCH is about healing. So change and then heal yourself, heal those wounds. And, when we have wounds, we often end up with scars. They heal, but we have scars. But that's okay. So you may end up scarred from this, but it's healed and you've done the work such that, you're not going to keep reverting back to that, reliving that crisis over, reliving the emotional stuff that goes along with it. So ARCH is what I would say is the acronym. So awareness, root cause, change, and healing.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the work you're doing. I love to hear, when people are trying to make a difference and sharing their own story, and, props to your son for allowing you to share the story. And I thank my ex-husband for allowing us to share the story.
Right.
That's how we help others, is being vulnerable and sharing and not pretending everything's a Facebook moment.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. So how can my audience get a hold of you if they want to?
You can go to www.healingspringsranch.com.
Okay.
Or they can find me at www.evolveandtransform.me.
Oh, I love it.
Thank you.
That's fantastic. Okay. You've done 2 TED Talks, so people can find you on TED, which is awesome. Yeah, they're really good. Just saying. So I just want to say just such deep gratitude for you and what you're doing in the world and who you are, and leaning into that journey to live a joyful life and have a purposeful, change the world, actually.
Thank you very much too. for giving me this platform. I really appreciate you, and I appreciate your work, and I appreciate this opportunity to spend time talking to you.
It's been fun.
Yeah. Thank
Okay.
you.
Well, to all the audience, take Arch and move forward.
I want to thank Rachel again for being a part of our podcast. What a resilient human. There's something really powerful about connecting with somebody who's cut from the same cloth, someone who's really dug deep and done the personal work to wrestle with her own emotional unavailability, someone who's rebuilt her life and done an amazing job in helping her kids navigate this journey. She became a student of addiction and turned her mess into a message and made what could have destroyed her into a mission to help others. Rachel has now dedicated her life to treating all aspects of the person, uncovering the root causes of one's addiction, and creating a program of healing to allow loved ones to emerge stronger than ever as their whole true selves. Thank you for joining us. If you are at the brink of losing it all and are willing to come out of the chaos of shame, heartbreak, and guilt, we've built a membership for you. Stop navigating this journey alone. Join us at voicesencourage.com/thrive.